Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Beyond Day One. Last week, we began to have a conversation about expectations that Gen Z has about the workplace. And we talked specifically about some good expectations to have. Well, this week, we're going to hopefully get to talking about expectations that you shouldn't have. But we're going to talk a little bit about why is there even an expectation gap? Why isn't that we just don't see things the way that we should see them together, the employer and the Gen Z worker? We're going to talk about that. And in order to do so, I brought the team with me and a special guest. I've got Ryan with me. I've also got Phillip with me. And also with us for the very first time, Gen Z intern, John.
What?
We're a multi-generational type of group here. So we've got a lot to share and hopefully some good feedback that you'll find helpful as you are navigating this space with us. So we're going to talk a little bit here about the expectation gap. What do we mean when we talk about the expectation gap? We're talking about the gap between what Gen Z is looking for and expecting in the workplace. You know, one of the things we talked about last week was the difference between being entitled and proper expectation. An entitlement comes to the door and says, "You owe me this. You owe me this type of work experience." Versus a realistic expectation says, "I come to the door hoping these things are there, but I'm going to learn what actually is there and adjust myself accordingly." So we want to deal with the fact that first of all, the reality is that a lot of times some people are dealing with your Gen Z entitlement. And some of that Gen Z entitlement is why some of these expectation gaps exist. Things around culture and the company and communication. So we're going to dig into that. And let's just jump right in. And I'll start with the first reason why expectation gap exists. And that's because of cultural differences, cultural change. You know, I think I mentioned last week that Gen Z grew up and they are truly, in that creator economy, the hustle culture. They see success and they see it happen fast. They're the people who microwave all the food. Everything's quick. It's drive through, it's go get quick food. It's about delivery of your stuff, not necessarily going to the store, walking through and checking every tomato. And so there's this sense of I get what I want when I ask for it. And excuse me, that can be a challenge because they come into the workplace and they have that same quick serve expectation uh, in the workplace. And oftentimes companies are either too old, they're not up to date enough, which we're going to talk about in a minute, or they're just not ready to meet that expectation of I want it and I want it now. Let's talk about another cause for the expectation gap. Brian, what about you? What are you thinking?
Well, I think another expectation gap is a communication breakdown. When you come into the workplace, a employer, a manager, a boss, a CEO, whoever is expecting maybe what they would consider common sense workplace communication. You know, a certain kind of lingo, certain kind of decorum, certain kind of email etiquette. And so they're over here on this frequency thinking about this thing, but Gen Z is over here thinking about this thing, which, by the way, we have a great course that kind of that teaches Gen Z and helps Gen Z or young adults entering the workforce on what is considered common sense communication, and a lot of other things that could be helpful. But I think that that gap comes in, and in that gap causes frustration because the manager or the boss or the CEO is over here thinking, okay, when I bring you onto my team, you're going to communicate this way. and the communication is going to be great and the decorum is going to be good. But Gen Z is like, I don't even know that language. And so it can really cause a lot of frustration and boil up pretty quickly.
You know, Ryan, I like what you're saying there, because not only are they not communicating on the same frequency, there in so many organizations, there's a breakdown in communication, period, where we don't even have the message going to point A to point B and going back and forth. You know, I've seen too many companies where the new hire comes in and they sit at a desk and they're like, okay, watch this compliance video and watch this, and that's going to be it. And they watch their videos. They sit there waiting for somebody to show back up at some point and tell them what to do next. And then they're like, well, that's all you got to do. So what did your boss tell you to do? Well, nobody's talked to me at all. And the boss hasn't been to visit. The HR person doesn't know what to do with them yet. So it's just it's a complete breakdown. And it starts with your onboarding process. If you don't know this, your onboarding process, I think, is one of your most critical aspects of bringing in new hires. That's why this course and even this podcast is called Beyond Day One. We talk about what happens from the point that you've orientated and beyond, and how to build and shape the skills that help you to survive and win beyond day one. But we recognize that if your day one doesn't go well, then you were already setting yourself up for failure, whether you're the organization or whether you're the individual. And when that communication breaks down day one, it is hard to recover from.
Yeah.
It's just difficult to recover, because now there's so many interesting expectations that start creeping into the pot, and it leads to nowhere good. So you've got to make sure that you fix your onboarding program, you fix your communication, so that not only are you on the same frequency, but you're making sure that that person has a checklist. Here's your step one today. Here's your step two today. Then you're going to have a conversation with step three today, and then step four, and on and on and on. And you map out that day. The next day, they should have a good bit of a mapping out of their days, at least for their first week, if you want them to be successful in their job and have a good sense of what they're supposed to do. Every minute doesn't have to be filled up, but you should be directing them throughout their day so they feel confident about what they should be doing next, or what they should be doing in that moment. Another area that kind of fits that is corporate lag. Phillip, I know you like to talk about that. What's your thought?
Yeah, well, corporate lag refers to what happens sometimes when maybe a Gen Z person or somebody from the younger generation enters into the workforce, and maybe they're working for a company that's been around for a long time, and that company may not be on the up and up in terms of having the latest technology, or even doing things or procedures in a way that seems sensible to a younger mind, if that makes sense. You may, like as a Gen Z, or you may walk in to a place and if you see a dot matrix printer over here, and then every system in the company is still on Windows 95 or 98 or something like that, I'm sure the first thing you might be thinking is, oh man, I'm in trouble. And especially in the current generation we're in, where we're used to efficiency. We're used to things, the software that we use and things like that, just being able to just crank things out. So there could be a bit of disappointment there. There could be a bit of frustration if you find that company is still operating in a bit of a, what is it called, an anachronistic way, like just kind of old school, and maybe not really up with the latest technology. But as a Gen Zer, I think the best route to take, or the best kind of approach you could have, is to be patient. First of all, just remember, okay, I'm coming into a place that obviously maybe things have just kind of stayed the same for a while. Maybe there will come a time when I can make some suggestions, or point out some things where we could improve efficiency here or there, suggest certain tools or things that might help. But in the meantime, learn the systems that are currently present first. Do your best to optimize those things that are there, even if it's a little frustrating and grinds your gears a little bit. And then as time goes on, you can transition into maybe bring in more suggestions and things like that to help, hopefully help move some things forward.
Yeah, Gen Z comes to the table, what they definitely are is they are mobile technologically mobile technologically savvy. They're not always computer savvy, but they're the ones that are like, okay, we're doing a day one and I've got to fill out some paperwork. And it's like, you don't have an iPad for this?
Right.
I gotta write on paper. What is this? And sometimes you have to deal with and let go of the frustration when there's corporate lag like that. Everybody's not up to speed. A great example of that is our federal government. I was reading something just recently about how the retirement process was so antiquated that it dated back to like the 50s and 60s. It seemed like was the last time that process was touched. And there literally is a mountain that was full with people's paperwork, handwritten paperwork about their retirement. And so someone was tasked with bringing that all up to date, bringing it up to speed, bringing it onto computers and moving that process forward. But just don't let the lag in an organization get you frustrated. All right, John, you've heard some of the things that we've talked about. What do you see as some of the expectation gaps that you're experiencing as you're working?
I think that it becomes very interesting when you mention what you've already mentioned, where there's like a disconnect in communication. So now all of a sudden, Gen Z feels misunderstood. And then you have a disconnect in the things that we're operating. And so now we feel like we can't, operate properly with the things that we're trying to work with. And then you have, and mix in like all the things that we mentioned in prior episodes. It kind of just develops this overall feeling or atmosphere of incompatibility. And it kind of becomes well, on top of like the whipped cream and cherry of just, most Gen Z employees don't necessarily align with like the mission statement of whatever company they're going for. Most of the time, they just want to be able to go in, clock in, get their paycheck, and leave for the day. And that kind of also flows into something that I talked to some of my Gen Z colleagues with. I asked them just out of curiosity what they felt like the ideal job would be for them. And then in combination of what their answers were to the question of whether or not, like why we even struggled to keep jobs in the first place. And the overall consensus is that Gen Z prioritizes their home life. We talk about a work-life balance, but for Gen Z, the balance isn't really much of a balance. It's, the priority is my life at home. And then my work life is secondary to that. And if home life is primary, then if one of these things are not compatible with the other, if my work is not compatible with my life, then the first thing to go is my job. I'd rather go find a new place that probably pays better, is easier to work with, or maybe I don't even have to talk to anybody, which is a huge preference for Gen Z. So there's this overall mindset of prioritizing like your personal time over your work, which isn't always a bad thing. But I do believe that too much of anything is a bad thing. And so it seems like with Gen Z, it is prioritized too far above their work life, where they just become, well, this is where a lot of these weaknesses shine, and it's in the workplace. Yeah, it's difficult.
It's interesting because when you hear that, if you're an employer, you should be recognizing that Gen Z quiet quits on you. They'll just be out looking for another job and won't tell you that they're not engaged where they are. So we've got to do a better job getting them in the door and getting rid of that expectation gap so that we can have success in the workplace. We'll see you guys next time.